Good afternoon. We will have a few more people join us, but welcome to the Culturally Powered Community Insight session. I think I know everyone, but for those that I don't, my name is Leslie Wright, and I'm the Director of External Engagement, and I'm just going to kick us off and get us grounded in this work, and then turn it over to Anthony. And he will highlight a lot more things and then introduce our illustrious guests. But before we get started, I wanted to make sure you knew what was in front of you. And so you have a theory of change that Anthony is going to be going over a little bit later. And then you also have the bios of our lovely guests that are here visiting us. So we're not going to read them when Anthony introduced them to you, but just so you have a little bit more information about Shannon and Jessica, that would be awesome. The other thing, because I know you were waiting on bated breath to get a copy of this presentation. So just so you know, you will be able to get a copy of the presentation afterwards. We're going to make copies for everyone. But, you know, they did inform me that killing that many trees and making that many copies may not be advisable, so I took that advice. So I just want to welcome you and then get into this work. So today we're going to give you some community context around culturally powered communities. Then Anthony is going to get into more detail about CPC. Shannon and Jessica from Hope Community and Connections to Independence, which are two of our CPC organizations, are going to talk to you a little bit more about their experiences with the program and how awesome I am. Oh, and then we'll discuss any questions that you have. And again, that was me, I hit something. We are going to try to be cognizant of the hour and get everyone out of here by 2 o'clock. So I'm not going to go through this and read it in detail, but just to, again, make sure that we level set. We always start everything out around our mission, vision, and values. So the vision, as you see there, the mission, as you see there, the values of equity, collaboration, agility, and transparency. CPC aligns quite nicely in our equity space. So the reason for showing this is not so that you will all know this. I'm sure we've all memorized one or all of that. But making sure that you know how CPC aligns with our org's values and mission. So equity in dealing with community organizations that may have been underfunded, may have been underserved, but are really, really embracing and working with our most vulnerable population is one of the things that CPC does. So when we talk about community context, kind of level setting around why this work is important. Our staff knows this a lot, and our guests really know this because they live this on a daily basis. But grounding ourselves in 1 in 4 Twin Cities residents live in poverty. People of color experience poverty at a rate of 3 times as their white neighbors. And then by 2040, this is really important for us in every department that does work here in United Way and in our community. 40% of the Twin Cities population is projected to be people of color. So as our community changes, the population that we serve is changing just as rapidly. And we have to address those things in the bucket areas that we are looking at impact from, which is education, economic opportunity, and household stability. But in dealing with those, there's some level setting that really hasn't come into play around our community organizations that are primarily serving, leading, and employing people of color. So our regional competitiveness and health depends on increasing our access not only to some Minnesotans, but all Minnesotans. So when we look at some statistics, these are heavy but give us great opportunity and hope. Education. White students graduate at a rate of 87% compared to 69% for students of color. And in some of the demographics, it's even more starking than 69%. Housing. Our community faces unequal access to home ownership, with whites in Minnesota owning homes at nearly twice the rate of people of color. So we're looking at 76% versus 38%. And when we are looking at the changing demographics, and Minnesota has gotten much recognition about this, being a great place to live, there's some issues that come along with that. So it's great to get the accolades, it's great to get the recognition of which it's deserved. However, as those accolades come in, our cost of housing is really, really rising. So affordability becomes a great, great target. So our companies are doing well, our unemployment rate is low. However, sometimes we're outpricing what people can afford to pay. And when we look at employment, in Minnesota, the median household income for white workers is $22,000 more than that of workers of color. And that is why we have such a hard push around our economic opportunity portfolio. And when some of our community members come in and say they're trying to get jobs, when we look at the lowest unemployment rate, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, however, for people of color, it is starkly different. So that is something that we have to address. So Anthony is going to be talking about this in more detail, but when you meet Shannon and Jessica, you're going to say, why in the world does this still exist? The percentage of people of color in executive director or CEO positions has remained under 20% for the last 15 years. And the interesting thing about that is as our demographics change, that too should change. And you're going to meet these dynamic individuals and go, now don't steal them though. Okay. So Anthony, yes.
Just quickly, does that pertain only to nonprofits or is that across the board, nonprofits?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So Anthony's going to take it from there.
There was a conference a couple months ago that we went to, and the author of the book called Decolonizing Mo was there. He had this stat that stood out to me, so I thought I'd bring it for credibility, because as they say, business school, you bring it to be credible. In 2004, the Applied Research Center, a racial justice think tank now known as Race Forward, found that grants aimed at communities of color averaged between 9 and 10% of all foundation funding in the 1990s. In 2014, only 7.4% of all philanthropy was given for people of color, while foundation funding focused on reaching people of color has never exceeded 8.5%. And we talk about what's the need for CPC and culture-specific organizations. I just want to highlight that one before I dive in. We see here the term culture-specific organization is something that transcends CPC. It's like the overarching umbrella. And as you see here, these are some of the attributes for them. As institutions consider how to move forward with the eradication of institutional racism and racial disparities, the predominant response today to these disparities is that of cultural competency trainings for service providers. However, while cultural competency can be implemented in far-ranging ways, its current dominant form is one that sees the problem as racial identity or issues of difference that need to be navigated with sensitivity. However, the missing point to that is that racial identities are not merely issues of difference, but rather they are hierarchy, configured manifestations of power. So we once again talk about why CPC is important. We're seeing great outcomes through the funding of CPC. And these are some of the outcomes that you'll see. We have better outcomes in mental health, education, and also in corrections. We know that clients receiving culturally relevant services and CSOs have better outcomes in these areas. This was a research done in-house, and I think it's amazing some of the data that's there. But the gist of it is, though, and I'll summarize in my own words, that if I'm of a particular ethnicity, I'm more comfortable going to a service provider of my same ethnicity. That's common, right? I'd ask you, does anybody go to a doctor who is not of the same ethnicity as you? And that's the point. And it's not an issue necessarily of racism, because you're going to go where you're comfortable, right? And that's basically what this data is showing. Here, what it's trying to communicate is that African Americans are twice as likely to go back and stay there and stay for recurring services if they find service providers who are the same ethnicity. We see Asian Americans, the rate jumps up to 14 times more likely, and Mexican also at 11 times more likely. Now we move to education itself. And for me growing up, I only had one African American teacher before I was in college, and that teacher was my father. And sadly, the statistics aren't good. I didn't grade this class. But nevertheless, these statistics say the opposite. Students who see teachers who look like them actually do better, and that's almost a no-brainer. And the beauty of these culture-specific organizations is they help bolster that. If I was at Haley Q. Brown and we were talking to Jonathan, and he was saying how they were losing some of their child care workers because they were getting trained up and they were being hired out in institutions, in the school system. And they were like, hey, we're feeding the school system. I was like, yes. So imagine this organization who we're supporting actually helping students do better in class. Also in corrections as well. We support John Place and Better Futures, but the numbers are the same. If they're more likely to go to a service provider that is basically have the same ethnicity as they do, they're more likely to stay, and they're less likely to commit a crime and go back into the system. And so we believe in supporting these institutions. They're effective, and we see, if we want to know if we're making a difference, we are making a difference. And that's the value of CPC and the value that it plays in our community. So before you have a document called the Theory of Change. When I started working here, it was a part of our advancement team corporate relationships. We were pitching this document because we believe that the outcomes are important. Before you see a culture powered communities use the practice theory of change. And here you always start with the end in mind, and that's the logic of the theory of change. And for us, our goal is a strengthened cultural communities and nonprofit sector with also improved positive outcomes for cultural communities in the Greater Twin Cities region. And if you start there and then work yourself backwards, you see the role that communities of practice will play in that process. And I say the term communities of practice because that's our methodology going forward, how we're going to engage a lot of our agencies. The process itself is built off the philosophy that those closest to the work are better at solving the problem than those who are kind of removed from the work. And so our hope is to bring our different agency partners together to find solutions to the problems in the community. Truthfully, they may even have some of the answers, just don't have the resources in order to bring to bear to cause a major impact. So our thought is that we're able to kind of galvanize them, convene them is the word we use, and bring them together, get these answers. Then we get to disseminate those answers through our system. It's not something we're doing readily yet, but our hope is that will be something that we'll do more readily in the future moving forward. And you see, as you work your way back up to the top, there's a circle kind of in the middle, and that circle represents the community of practice process, where our team of leaders, executives will come together and communicate to us what they're doing. Now, this doesn't put us in a position where we have the answers. Actually, we're at the table with them. We're there learning as well. We're finding what best practices are, and we may even apply them ourselves. These executives are competent. They have great education, so they're shooting about education. They're where the rubber meets the road, and hopefully they have some insight that we can use to make our organization better as well. As I'm running now. Here we talk about capacity building, and that's what the CPC does. It builds the capacity of the organization. Herein lies some of the challenges with CPC, just intrinsically. If you're looking for, and this is the word I always use because I was in the advancement team, ROI, right? Like how can we show impact? Well, it's hard to show impact when you're doing capacity building, particularly after only 3 years, right? So it's going to take time for that to show up. How, if we have an organization that's only been here 3 years and maybe only has funding for 4 or 5 years, can we show that it's making a big impact? You need more time. And that's the issue. Some of the research that we don't have in this area, some of the empirical data we don't have is because a lot of money hasn't been put in this direction yet. Our hope is that moving forward there will be more money allotted to this area, and we'll see what empirical data looks like, what quantitative analysis looks like, and how we're making a return on investment. Also, these different areas that the executives decided to focus on within CPC, they were the ones deciding these are self-identified areas. So they decided what areas they were strong at, and then we came in and gave the support in those specific areas. Here lies the number to date. $4.6 million has been invested in CPC. I don't know if you think that's a lot of money or not, but that money also includes individuals working, the support they've been given, and we think there has been some great progress within those organizations. Akua just came in and said, that made me nervous, so you know. Let me be off that slide. Almost done. All right. Okay, so this is our big ROI one. This is the one we love to talk about. I mean, heard people in advancement talking about it as well. This investment is crazy, right? So basically, and I'll throw out the number, $3,000 was given to this organization. They invested in a writing grant for writing. And as a result, they received $750,000. We love to say we can replicate that every single time, but that's not realistic. But the fact is, we see ROI, return on investment. If you want to know, are you making a difference? You are. We talked about that earlier. That if I'm a young man, I'm going to a school and I see a teacher of mine saying, holler, I'm going to do better in class. That's what the data says. Except for when I was under my dad, I did that, but that's not the norm, right? And so if you want to know if you're making a change, you are. You're helping in an opportune time. The word is kairos. It's an opportune time. This CSOs are all over. We're not the only ones doing it. Maybe 10 years ago, we were kind of like one of the leaders with CPC or maybe in capacity building, but now this is the norm. People understand there are disparities out there that will only be solved if we proactively try to solve the problem. Next, it is my privilege and honor to introduce our esteemed leaders today. And every time I email them, I try to call them leaders because they are leaders. They're as educated, if not more educated than I am, sadly. I'm trying to get more education. But nevertheless, you are. And because of that, we're excited to have them here today. First, Shannon Smith-Jones is a visionary and strategic leader with a passion for valuing and dignifying the work of community members. She serves as Executive Director of Hope Community, a cutting-edge organization that values housing as a stabilizing force in the community and demonstrates the value of community engagement long before it was established practice in the field. Shannon, please. Next, we have Jessica Rogers. She's lived in the Twin Cities most of her formative years. As of July 1st, 2010, she became the Executive Director of Connections to Independence, or C2I. The mission of C2I is to provide unique programming and advocacy for youth in foster care ages 14 through 24 to promote a successful and healthy transition to adulthood. Jessica. So we have a couple of canned questions, and then we'll open it up for everyone. I'm sorry, I'm assuming that's my getting in trouble. First question, and whoever wants to answer this, including you. What is it like being an ED of a culturally specific organization in the Twin Cities?
The first time I looked at this question, I was like, is that what we are? I never looked at C2I as being that. We just started an organization and saw saw needs in the community that needed to be alleviated. That's youth who are in an HIV foster care system, specifically African American youth who are overrepresented in the system. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, this is kind of a lonely place to be. We're looked over quite a bit for a smaller organization right now. We're serving about 80 young people, specifically in Hennepin County. And so we get overlooked by folks like United Way. This is very intimidating to even apply to United Way until we heard of CPC. And I sat down with Leslie and some other folks and said, you should apply to this. I'm like, we're never going to get it. It's United Way. And so it's a lonely place to be. It's a lonely place to be, but also I have an amazing team. I didn't even realize that my entire team, except for 1 out of 7, we're all African American. We just hired him probably about 3 weeks ago. And he walked in and was like, look at all this melanin. I have never been in an office that's run by African Americans. So at that point, when I looked at this question again, I was like, okay, we are a culturally specific organization, and that we have to identify that is really sad still in this day, that we're really out here just fulfilling a need that is really needed in the community, because the youth that we serve are very overlooked as well, invisible populations we call them.
So can I ask a quick question about that? I really like, so you're saying you didn't go trying to look for an African American organization, there was a need, and you just met the need, and what happened was?
Yeah, so we were a program that was started at Summit Academy OIC, and we transitioned, so the 3 of us, there were 4 of us, 3 of the 4 were African American, and so as I was looking for new staff, I wanted the staff to be, like we're saying, that looked like the youth that we were representing, and so that just kind of, it wasn't even really, I thought it was competent people who really related to our young people that we ended up becoming them.
I will echo Jessica's sentiments. I, too, had thought about it this way. Hope Community has been around for 42 years in the Phillips community. One of the most diverse communities in the state, and represents a lot of different communities. And not long into my role, I kept getting asked to be on panels. And I said something to a lady, I'm like, wow, I'm getting a lot of these requests. And she said, you are the only Black woman leading a housing organization. And it like hit me like a ton of bricks. And we go through this work. One of the things we do know is that relationships matter. And they matter everywhere. So they matter in our community, and they matter in the funding world. And when you looked at Anthony's statistics and you see about who's succeeding, who's not succeeding, where are the networks, we don't have an intrinsic network that's connected to wealth. It's not intrinsic. And so there is a divide there that boxes us out of a lot of rooms that would help us continue our work. So that's one of the main things. And I think the other thing that happens as a leader of color is because of our community and because they rely on us so much, we have different demands on us than what there would be if we were white. So whenever there's a young person that comes in the office, my staff might come and grab me. Oh, I need them to see you. Let me introduce you to the executive director. I get at least a call a week, maybe every other week. Can you sit down with this person? They're exploring, they want to know, they need to know what it's like as a woman of color navigating this. And so the demands are different. So we're trying to balance the demands of the organization. We're trying to balance and making sure that we're getting the funding, the visibility. How do we get the relationships that will help us get to the amount of wealth that we need in order to continue to do the amazing work that we do.
How has race played a role in the effectiveness of your organization?
That's kind of a trick question. It kind of goes both ways. And I'll start with just my personal life experience of being a middle school and high school student in Edina. I graduated in 1990, so there were many, I graduated with 5 people of color. My parents always told me, you can't be average. You've got to be above average. You can't just come home with C's. You've got to be better than your white counterparts. You can't have the same types of curfews that these kids have. My mom told me specifically, different things happen to little Black boys and little Black girls at night when they're out. You can't just go out and party with your friends. And so that's kind of stuck with me my entire life. It's probably made me successful to this day, because as being a executive director, founder, specifically too, of an organization that's looked at as a Black organization, I cannot just be average out there. I've got to be above average, so work harder. I'm a single mom too. I get chastised by my son and my mother all the time. We work too much. But race plays a really big role in the work we're doing, and it probably drives me even harder to do better, specifically for our young people, and to be a role model for the young people that I work with who are in Asian foster care who don't have a lot of even familial role models, people in the community. So I feel like I have to show that even more to our young people and to my staff that I'm developing. A negative aspect, actually, I was asked to be part of a legislative team pushing some legislation through for youth in foster care, and I came to the second round of meetings and found myself to be the only person of color in the room, so I have to speak for all Black youth in foster care. And at times it's intimidating, sometimes it's frustrating. When I walked in this room, one of my counterparts of the partnering organization, a white woman who was executive director, when I walked in the room, her eyes kind of got big. She's like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "Really?" Like, "Well, you know what we do, that's why I'm here, because no one here at this table is actually in the trenches working with these youth, doing direct service." And then we started talking about who's funding you, who's not funding you, and then she found out I was being funded by the United Way, and I told her about CPC. She actually got angry. She's like, "Oh, because I'm not Black, I don't get funding from the United Way." And I was like, "Are you kidding?" I was going to use a choice word right there. But I get this. I mean, and it's really frustrating that and thinking about this today, I was like, how sensitive do I need to be? But it's that white privilege that she didn't even think that organizations like mine do need a leg up to develop our organization, to do this capacity building. And so race plays a very big role, positively and negatively, in the media. I've reached out to some great folks in the media on different channels who are African American. They're kind of alone in their work, who have stood by my side, and they'll annually do, or a couple times a year, do stories about my organization. So in that way, it plays a great role. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't have a whole lot of time. I could talk. This is the stuff we talk about all day long. So
the double-edged sword is true. It is a double-edged sword. I think in terms of the work that we're doing, being one of the only ones in the room is a reality. And convincing people on a regular basis that the things that exist in our communities are not because there's something wrong with our community. It is a result of a history that has systemically excluded folks. And we are dealing with this today in a way that the onus and the burden is put on our young people, it's put on our community members, and always being in that space saying, well, let's look at the history. Let's look at this. I had a funder tell me that he heard that kids weren't doing well in North Minneapolis because their dads weren't around. I'm in a funding meeting, and I'm being faced with someone telling me that the young people in the community that I historically grew up in, 4 generations in, they're not doing well because their dads aren't around, which is not the truth. And what I asked him was, do you think that Jim Crow, segregation, redlining, do you think any of this might have had, Brown versus Board of Education? Do you think any of this might have an impact on where our young people are and what they're doing and where resources are given? I'm like, we still don't have equal education. If you go out to school districts in the suburbs, those kids go home with iPads, tablets. Minneapolis Public Schools does not give that. They are not having access to the same level of experiences and exposure that other schools are. And so part of the struggle with being a leader of color is you're in all these rooms and you're convincing folks that there actually is an issue and there's not something wrong with the community, and it's not because they're lazy, and it's not because they want to just they don't want to work, it's not because they'd rather be homeless, it's not because of all these things. So part of it is that, and that's exhausting. It's exhausting. I lived in Hope Community as a single mom of 2 boys. I went through the organizing training. I am the community that we serve. And so when you're hearing things in a way, it's like talking about your family when you're hearing about the way people perceive you. And it is exhausting. It is truly exhausting. And our community trusts us. So when you're engaging in these spaces and you're navigating, the community trusts us like, oh, we know that you have this. And so wanting to honor that trust in all the spaces that we show up in and making sure that we're standing firm on what we believe, that we're staying true to our word, and that the way we communicate honors our community is something that I'm always intentional with, constantly. And so this network of being able to have other leaders of color so that we can kind of come together and have like this collective side, right? To have this space where we don't have to convince somebody that we matter, that we don't have to convince someone that we're smart, that we don't have to convince somebody that we have the ability to be in the room, that we have the right to be in the room, is a godsend. And it really helps us kind of like, okay, we can take our walls down and that we can have honest conversations and we can say, oh, well, did you try this? Oh, you should talk to this person over there. They're really great. They can help you navigate this. And the network and the support that you get along with Leslie and Akua and Anthony is just amazing. And it truly helps us kind of get revived, give us the resources to go out there and continue to do the work.
And Anthony, when you mentioned in your presentation that only 20% of executive directors in our community are folks of color, like Shannon just said, we're connected to our cause, and I don't know what the stats are of people who've been through whatever their mission is of their organization, but I'm about to say that I was born in foster care myself, and I was blessed to be adopted. And so this is more than just work for us. This is like our divine purpose and our passion in life. So to have a space that is safe for us to come to and connect with each other is truly amazing.
Sorry, long.
She has sometimes 2 more hours.
What is the biggest challenge your organization faces?
I think we have similar but different challenges. So I was blessed to be able to develop this organization and grow this organization, but also it's also a challenge for us to get people to know and understand what it is to be a teenager in an Asian American foster care system. People understand homelessness, they understand hunger, they understand education gaps, they understand LGBTQ population barriers, but they don't understand that the one population that intersects all of those are youth who are in foster care. So it's been challenging for me to help raise awareness about this population, specifically around that work. In addition, a huge challenge for us is funding. Getting into the United Way, getting into, I just had a conversation with the POLAD Foundation yesterday. We've applied to them twice, and their last funding round was around housing, specifically calling out youth in foster care. I'm like, oh yeah, we've got this, and we didn't get it. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And so someone from POLAD actually reached out to me after coming to a movie premiere we did for a documentary called Foster that we invited them to come to. It was on HBO in May, and so I really need to talk to you. And so they're trying to figure out ways, like the United Way has done, of how do we serve these organizations that you guys are looking at impacting these big numbers. We're not ever going to be a Big Brothers Big Sisters, well, hopefully someday we will, or a Boys and Girls Club. But we need the support and capacity building and folks like the United Way and POLAD Foundation to look at innovative ways to support these organizations. And this is a truly innovative program that you guys have developed. In fact, when I told them about this grant and this program, he said he's going to go back and talk to the ED there and say, hey, should we maybe fund CPC or do something similar? So I gave your name specifically, so when that individual reaches out to you, you can up our support of everyone sitting here. But no, I mean, this is really innovative. It's very needed, and so hopefully you guys will ask more questions, support this program even more. But yeah, I think funding and just getting people to come in and look at an organization of 7 small, 80 kids, that maybe it's not the number impact, but listen to our young people's stories. They stay connected to us for 10 years, and that's the longest stability that they've had in their entire lives. In fact, we're trying to figure out a pathway to make sure these kids become leaders and actually come and work for our organization now. And funding from CPC will help us develop those types of things. So lots of challenges, but I'll just leave it at that for now.
So the challenges, I think funding is always a challenge. I mean, it's easy to lead with that. But I think connected with that is the evaluation of the work. So Hope Community is an asset-based organization. We approach the community with listening, connections, community, right? Leadership development, all of these things. Digging deep into evaluation, community engagement and the impact of that engagement and longevity is still new in the evaluation field. It's very hard to measure. You could do ripple effect impacts, all these things, but it's extremely hard and time consuming to measure that. And so really wanting to, I believe deeply that Hope, we have an amazing story. We do amazing work, and I still don't think we're telling the breadth of it, right? Because it's difficult to really measure that. And so there's something around the evaluation tools that is really a challenge. And I've already pointed out the demands as a leader of color that happen in the organization. And Hope Community has about 15 staff. We outsource our property management. We have close to, 300 units of housing. We have food justice work. We do organizing work. We do leadership development work. Our reach is broad, and we do a lot with those staff members that we have. And in that, we're like trying to operationalize evaluation, and not just for funding purposes. I want to understand the impact of the work. I want help understanding the impact of the work and to be able to tell the story, and so that we can be quicker and more iterative with our work. That we're getting real-time data that's saying this worked, this didn't work. We set out to do this, we didn't get that, we got this. Oh, that was great. Let's continue down that path, or we need to pivot and do this. And that thing is really helpful for us. But the capacity internally to actually do really great evaluation is a huge challenge and is oftentimes a barrier to the funding that we could get because we're not able to, we don't have internal capacity to do that the way that we would like to. Other challenges, I think they're regular challenges, navigating spaces, wanting to have a national platform around anti-displacement work. The Phillips community is at risk. Rents are going up. It's walkable to downtown. We see what's happening. We have community members that are literally coming to us like, rent's going up over here. We don't think we can stay. We're getting on a housing list in Iowa because their Section 8 is quicker beyond. We don't want to leave the community, but we're having to make a false housing choice because we only have this much capacity. We only have this much income. And so really trying to weed through the demands of community around some of these things that are happening. Real time is one of the biggest challenges as well.
Last question for me. How has partnering with United Way helped to alleviate some of those challenges?
So I'll lead with our biggest accomplishment thus far. We applied for the SVP grant. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Social Venture Partners? Yeah, okay. So it's actually an excruciating process. You submit an LOI, and then there was probably about 150 LOIs. We got down to, we were able to submit a full RFP, and then we made it to the site visit, which is narrowed down to 5 organizations. We did not make the petition the first time we applied. When we were denied was right when we got our CPC grant, and so the funding with that, the support and resources that we got from that, filling out the gaps analysis, really helped us identify how to narrow down some of the things we needed to work on that SVP told us that we were kind of missing in our presentation and our site visit. And we reapplied again last year, and we made it to pitch night, and we got the call in December that we actually received the funding for SVP. So it's a 3-year partnership. That would not have been possible without the resources that we received from the United Way and the CPC funding. And so that's a 3-year partnership to help grow our organization and known to grow organizations by 50%. Just use an example, they worked with Cookie Cart, and the Cookie Cart just opened their St. Paul store last year, I believe it was. Again, what this helps, having a safe space, I look at myself as like, I'm 10 years old in my organization, and Shannon is 45. Not me. I'm in my organization. But to have that experience in the room, not only with Shannon, but all the other executive directors who have been through this before me and are still going through some situations, but like Shannon stated, to say, hey, go talk to this person, or I use this resource, or this is what we're doing, has been absolutely priceless. We cannot put a price tag on it, even though we do need money for that. But for me, I mean, it's almost like being, I don't want to belittle, it's almost like therapy, you know, where I can't, there's no one else who understands what I'm going through. My family doesn't understand what I'm going through. My friends don't understand what I'm going through. That's the one space that I can go to, and even now I have a whole family, circle of folks that I can go to email about different things, or say, let's grab coffee, this is what I'm going through, and it's okay to shed a tear or two, because it does get that heart-wrenching at times, where I almost quit a couple times the past couple of years, and I went to my board and said, hey, do we need someone else who does not look like me to be at the helm of this organization, because I want the organization to live on. I want every kid who's in foster care across the country to have access to a C2I. And they looked at me and I was in tears, and I'm like, no, absolutely not. There's no one who's going to come to this work with your shared passion. And so having a group of people who are connected to their organizations, like Shannon said, she's a product of a whole community, who understand what I'm going through. And I had conversations with Akua. We had a group, and I think I shed tears there too, saying this is really difficult to navigate with this funder, and to find out that I was not the only one. And to have that space where I felt safe to share what was going on, I just can't really articulate that into powerful enough words to make you understand what this really means to us. So
I will echo what I said earlier around the safe space. I think that it is priceless. It's huge, and it helps your sanity. It just helps your sanity. Like, you're getting told all the time that this isn't real. You're imagining that. That's not what really happened. That's not what we meant. Oh, sorry that I came across that way. And then you come to a group and they're like, oh yes, girl. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy, right? So it helps. It just helps settle your energy. It helps center you. It helps ground you. And it helps get you in this space of saying, okay, let's get my energy back, right? So we can go out and do the work. I've been in my organization for a little over 2.5 years. We had never received United Way funding. CPC was, and when I remember seeing this come across my desk, and I said, we need to go for this. And the organization was like, oh, United Way's, you know, we're going through transition, but they weren't comfortable. They said, we're not sure. This is the spot for us. And I'm like, no, I think I want us to do this. And it has been amazing, and it has been helpful, and it helps build that bridge into more funding, and it definitely helps. United Way has national recognition. People know that they're held to a certain standard, and when they see that as part of your funding, it also helps to be able to leverage that as well. But having the resource, I mean, before Anthony was there and Tiffany was, I would call Tiffany, I'm like, girl, I need help with A, B, C, or D, and she'd call me right back. She would connect me with the person that I needed to be connected with. She would do an email introduction. To be able to have those resources is so helpful. And to even circle back what I said earlier, we don't have this innate network of folks. We don't have those same relationships just because of how we were socialized, where we were socialized, and how many rooms that we're locked out of. And it's a reality that we don't have access to all the rooms.
it's like getting that stamp of approval from the funding world. It's, okay, we're stamped with United Way now, and so folks, actually, funders see us now. They see us now, they see you guys listed on there as a funder.
Questions?
They answered all your questions?
Let me
I have a question. You had talked about, growing to the size of, I don't know if I need to make, you talked about growing to the size of Big Brother, Big Sister, but I'm just curious what your goals are for your organizations, both of you, and how you see United Way supporting you moving forward as you continue to serve the community in meaningful ways.
Yeah, so we're working on that right now with SVP. We're in our first year work plan. Initially, my plan was that we wanted a C2I Ramsey County, Anoka County, Chicago, like across the country, and what does that look like? How do we do that? And now we're looking at doing segments of our programming and actually going out and meeting with different folks in children and family services in different communities, locally and across the country, to see what is your need. We actually did a survey, went down to the National Foster Care Conference in St. Petersburg back in May, and we had a little survey, we hosted a table, and we found out that the need is far and wide. So pretty much everything, because we're a holistic approach to moving kids on to life after foster care. So we're still trying to work that out and figure out what that looks like. Right now we're working on our infrastructure, making sure we have solid infrastructure so we are able to grow, and then year 2 we're probably going to look at what does that mean. But obviously the end goal is that we're able to serve more youth locally and at a national level.
3 things come directly to my mind. One is around housing. And so what are the strategies that we can put in place so that individuals and families living in the Phillips community have the opportunity to stay in the community that they want to live in. So being able to continue to grow that strategy, and those would be one of the things. We just got a Best Buy Teen Technology Center, and our young people have like done amazing. They were part of a Best Buy campaign, they've won awards, and what we want to do is continue for that quality, that high level quality and access to expand, and that we would like to see a program that we can initiate or institute that would allow young people to come out of there with skills that they'd be job ready with. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to expand with. IT is one of those fields that you can go in and have livable wage with the skills. So we're doing coding, we're doing app development, we're doing production, we're doing all kinds of things, and so that's another place that we would like to expand. And another place is, we've done some work, one of our things that we do is Parks and Power, so we've done organizing around equity in the parks. And one of the things that we're having high demand on is twofold. One is that people doing the work are experiencing trauma and are being re-traumatized. And so how do we make sure that people that are frontline, that are doing the work, whether it's organizing, whether it's working with foster care, are not being re-triggered and are being taken care of, and what are the mechanisms that we can do to have it in-house training or healing or something that we can address that. And secondly, being able to continue to expand on that work and have, whether it be a center where people can come in and understand how to operationalize equity. We hear about equity all the time, we're talking about it, we're in meetings, but people are not clear how to get from the conversation into implementation. And so the work that we've been doing it well, and we want to be able to expand that so that more people have access to that.
The microphone's for recording. Any other questions?
See, we're doing it right now.
I'm Scott, I'm with the fundraising team, and one of the things we struggle to articulate is the importance of the convening of the community practice model, that the value of kind of getting groups together so they can, and I appreciate you spoke about the power of the personal support you gain as leaders and how that improves your leadership. But knowing it's a struggle for us to communicate it, I'd love to hear if you've got some additional information about the power of that, especially kind of how it improves your organizational development, or kind of how that plays out in ways that benefit the larger organization.
So one of the things that I think about, have you been in a room where you're the only one? Or you're the only white male? And if you have, do you feel comfortable? Do you feel supported? Do you feel understood? And I think that is, so I don't know if flipping that around in conversations of like what that looks like to be the only one every day in most of the places that you're in, how that can impact you. And especially when microaggressions are real. Not only am I Black, I am a woman. And so there are things that show up in spaces where I'm minimized, where I'm dismissed, where I'm talked over and around, and that makes it very difficult. And so there's, I don't know, if flipping that conversation, or if people are even ready to hear that. And because I recognize that's something that a lot of people aren't ready to hear and aren't ready to have that conversation. But that's a reality for me. I think the other piece around is that collectively, we're doing a lot of stuff. We're doing a lot of work collectively. And to be able to do that, our work actually gets better just by even the small exchange we're having. Because we share resources readily with one another. Everybody doesn't share resources readily with us. And so to be able to be in a space where people are sharing resources readily with us, their connections readily with us, is priceless. Trying to think, I had a third one, but it's a fleeting thought. I'll let Jessica talk. If it comes back, I'll say something.
I would just articulate the power of relationships. You can't do anything without relationships, and we're very siloed in our work, like we've echoed several times. And the power of us all coming together and developing this collective relationship with each other is priceless. You can't do anything, and like, I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't have a relationship with, everyone sitting here, But relationships are absolutely priceless, and to articulate that, I think you said it very well, but being the only one in the room constantly can just beat you down. And so to come to a room where you can share, and again, I'm going to say a safe space, I can't say that enough, because we don't have that. We see each other face to face, and that's it. But that power when we're together, like I already have something I want to share tomorrow when we meet the meeting tomorrow morning, that I can't share with my staff, I can't share with anybody else, but this group is so supportive and provides resources that we can't get anywhere else. And so, I can remember it. Okay.
The other piece was, Anthony mentioned 8.5% funding is going to leaders of color, right? And we are going to a world that is predominantly going to be people of color. How do we prepare our nation? How do we prepare communities if we're not investing in up-and-coming leaders? If we're not making that investment, it's not just about us as individual leaders. It's about the collective. And there's a proportion of 8.5%. That means all the other funding is not coming to us. Over 90% of funding is going outside of folks that look like us, right? So, and they're the growing population. So if we're not investing in that, it's like, that's a bad return on investment. And like that, we can talk straight math, finance, and talk about where investments should be made. And I could make give me like an hour, I could make a good financial reason why it makes sense to invest in communities of color and cohorts like this.
Hi, I'm Morgan May. I also work with the fundraising team. Through the organizational assessments or the work that you're doing with CPC, and or through these conversations that you're having among your peers, have you learned anything about your organization or about the landscape that has surprised you? Have you encountered surprises through this process?
So with the funding, we were actually able to work with the Improve Group, and they did a local and national geographical scan of specifically the work that C2I is doing, and found that nobody locally or nationally is working with foster care youth 14 to 24 who are in Asia out of foster care and getting the outcomes that we're getting. You guys mentioned around education, only about 45% of youth who are in Asia out of foster care graduate from high school. We graduate 92% of our kids. And that's not because we have the magic curriculum. It's around relationships that we develop, genuine relationships, because we can relate to our young people. And so that was really amazing to be able to have that resource to do that. So I'll just say that that's one of the things that we found out through getting the funding from CPC, that we were able to do that we would not have been able to do that work. One more thing. Actually, speaking with the Poland Foundation yesterday, when I mentioned CPC, he used the word innovative. He's like, that's a really innovative idea. And so I I think you guys might be on the cutting edge of something for larger foundations that maybe, because we applied for the most recent grant here and we did get it, and I had a phone call, and I was told that only 10% of funding went to smaller organizations like mine. And so this allows C2I to get into these circles of support and funding that you guys are really on the cutting edge of something that other foundations will probably be looking at, and that you guys should showcase this as one of your I shouldn't say better programs, but for me it's one of your better programs. But something that really brings the community of color together, not only for funding and capacity building, but for growth as leaders and to help grow our communities.
I can't think of anything necessarily that I'm surprised about. I think maybe if anything, I'm surprised that there was a place so eager to invest in organizational capacity. Right? That's money that's never out there. You know, to really help with the infrastructure, really help with the board building, really helping with making sure that our foundation is solid so that as we expand our work. And I think if anything, I was surprised that that was a resource that people were willing to fund. Normally, they want us to very little admin costs. Everything that goes out needs to go directly to the community, and the ability to have spaces and time to think and strategize and get experts in there that can help facilitate deep conversations to move the organization forward are not in abundance. And so I think I was surprised that there was a resource out there that actually did that.
And I'm surprised that more people aren't funding this specific program. This is just, I mean, this is coming from me who's in it, what I'm getting from it, and knowing other leaders who've been through it, that I'm surprised that more people are not and aren't funding CPC.
We're at time. Thank you for your time. You have a good day going. Let's keep moving forward. Good day.
Thank you.